Hello and welcome to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege. Today is Thursday, September 26th. Week 4 is officially upon us. Starting tonight, we have the Dallas Cowboys taking on the New York Giants in an NFC East matchup here tonight on Thursday Night Football. We're going to get into previewing that in just a couple seconds, but also later on in the show, we're going to be talking about some must-win games already so early on in the season, talking about the Bengals and also the Dallas Cowboys. What a loss this week in Week 4 would mean for each of their seasons going forward, and some more topics later on the show. So stay tuned, stay seated to keep watching these segments coming up. But before I get on to starting with the first segment, previewing the game tonight, I want to remind you guys, if you have any questions or want to make any comments or just share anything you have to say surrounding the NFL, any of the topics on today's show, we want to hear everything you'd like to say. So whether it's any of those things, don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. Now, if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out and gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to go about that. Just use the new Super Chat feature we have available to you guys now. Just by clicking the $sign at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. This way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel, and we rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we always appreciate whenever you guys are able to do that for us. So go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting as possible. It's a big help for us. We always appreciate you guys. So please, again, use the Super Chat feature, get involved with the show, and let me know what's on your mind during any of the live shows. So with that being the case now, we could jump right into talking about the start of the NFL's Week 4, none other than with tonight's matchup, an NFC East matchup between the Cowboys traveling over to this side of the country to face the New York Giants in their first test against an NFC East opponent. While the Giants, on the other hand, have already played the Commanders, they've lost to them already. They're coming off of their first win. Regardless of that, they just beat the Cleveland Browns, and both of these teams now enter into this game with a 1-2 record. A lot is on the line just based off of that. 1-2 records, while the Commanders are 2-1, the Eagles are 2-1. The loser of this will unfortunately have the last place worst record in the division. So to avoid that, there's a lot of pressure going into tonight's game. And already this morning, when I was prepping for the show, the Cowboys were 5.5-point favorites on some betting websites as well. So I feel like that's a pretty fair estimation based on what we've seen so far from both teams. So getting on with the New York Giants first and foremost, they're dealing with some significant injuries in their secondary. No Drew Phillips. He's going to be out tonight with a calf injury. No Adoree Jackson as well, out with another calf injury. And Darius Slayton is also questionable because he is dealing with some thumb discomforts. I don't know the specifics of it, but I feel like he should be good to go. If it's only a thumb, depending on the severity of it, obviously, he should be out there. I don't think it's that big of a deal for him to be out there. If he, receives some treatment on it and gets it all prepped before the game, I probably would expect to see Darius Slayton out there, but no Drew Phillips and no Adoree Jackson in tonight's game. And just looking back at the Giants over last week, clearly their best performance of the season. They had 8 sacks and a great run defense against the Cleveland Browns. Their defensive line completely taking over in that game, making it impossible for Deshaun to do basically anything. Brian Burns, Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, all those guys all played a fantastic game. They had another defensive lineman by the name of Chapman. He played a decent game as well. And just a great showing for the Giants, because if the offense isn't going, obviously if Daniel Jones might be having a good day, he played pretty well, to be fair, against the Browns last week, but whether or not that's a consistent thing, I think it's a great sign to see their defense kind of put on a performance like this, right, to reassure everyone that they made good decisions by going out and getting Brian Burns, the development of Thibodeau, obviously Dexter Lawrence still there. This is the most important, more star-studded part of their defense, arguably of their entire team, from a collective point of view. So I love the performance from them. Their defense held strong. They held the Browns to 15 points on the road. Very impressed with what I saw from the Giants last week. And now you could say Cleveland's offensive line is banged up, and they are. Jack Conklin didn't play in that game. Jedrick Wills got hurt. Wyatt Teller's now on the IR. So the Browns are dealing with a lot of stuff with their offensive line, but still, now you look over to this matchup with Dallas's offensive line, and they're starting two rookies tonight. They're starting Jalen Guyton and one of their guards, Connor Beebe. So one of the guards probably going to see a lot of Dexter Lawrence tonight. How does that matchup play out? And Jalen Guyton on the outside, most likely against Brian Burns or Kayvon Thibodeau, depending on which side they're on, should be points where, coming off of the performance against the Browns, should be two matchups that the Giants are really looking forward to try and exploit any way that they can. And on offense, we all know the story about the Giants' offense, right? At least if you watch some of the games, Malik Neighbors is one of those guys for the Giants. It's basically their entire offense for the most part, right? He's a majority of it, I should say. I won't say all of it, obviously, but he is a very reliable weapon for Daniel Jones for this team already. He's a superstar already, pretty much. He scored 2 touchdowns last week, and now heading into this game, it should be more of the same. I would think it'd be foolish for the Giants not to target him as much, but somebody else I wanted to kind of highlight would be Devin Singletary, obviously, because of the whole narrative around the Cowboys defense and how porous it has been. Singletary hasn't been too disappointing, considering you went from Saquon, and people were pretty upset about that, obviously. But to bring in Devin Singletary and people feeling, indifferent about him coming on, I thought he's played pretty well through the first 3 weeks of the season as well. So he's one to look out for in this matchup against the Dallas run defense. That'll be a bigger talking point later on in the show. But the offensive line, too, lastly here for the Giants, has also played pretty well. Myles Garrett didn't really do too much last week, and I've thought as a whole they've held up pretty decently, and it's no surprise that Daniel Jones plays a half-decent game as well. So if they can continue that, it's not going to be all gloomy and bad results and just bad football, right? If they can have that offensive line playing better than they have been, there is some hope there, right? It looks like they're kind of getting something together. But moving on now to the Dallas Cowboys. On the injury front, they just placed their defensive tackle, Jordan Phillips, on the IR, which isn't great. Obviously, talking about stopping the run. Their safety, Marquise Bell, and their cornerback, Kalen Carson, are both doubtful heading into tonight's matchup. They're most likely not going to suit up and play. So how does that affect the game plan for them, and who steps into their place already? Being without Deron Bland, now being down Kalen Carson as well, could be a weaker point on that defense, if you will. Coming off of back-to-back losses at home also is the biggest storyline, right? And we're going to get into that subject a little bit more in the next segment, but a lot more pressure now for the Cowboys to win this game. Everyone believes this game is their chance, really, to right the ship a little bit, their get-right game after 2 bad losses. This is a good opportunity based on the recent history. I think it's 8 games now that the Cowboys have beaten the Giants in a row, so there's always that. I wouldn't call it like arrogance or anything like that, but if there was any game you'd like to have on your schedule at this point, it would probably be this one based on the history and the makeups of each team. So there's a lot more pressure on them. You could look at it as a way as everyone's kind of expecting the Cowboys to win this game. How do they come through for those expectations, and how does their offense really kind of build off of the one very solid quarter that they had last week against the Ravens? Because that game honestly shouldn't have been that close, but honestly, in that last quarter, for them to come back and score those touchdowns as they did, you got to give them some props, but can they do it throughout the entire game? And that's going to start with starting faster, like Dak Prescott emphasized in their post-game conference against the Ravens. So that's kind of an outlook at both teams. And now getting into the key matchups and the factors, the questions I want answered tonight that would give you an answer on who's probably going to win this game if they answer these questions. First off, CeeDee Lamb going up against Deonte Banks, the best corner for the Giants going up against the number one receiver for the Cowboys. CeeDee Lamb was obviously visibly frustrated last week by not getting the ball. I think he had 4 receptions on 7 targets for like 60-something yards. Not what you'd expect out of him. So this is a game where obviously you saw the frustrations. You kind of don't want to overfeed him or target him, but he's got to be more involved. Obviously, he's your best player on that side of the ball. It's just foolish and unnecessary for him not to be a major part in it. So look for the Cowboys to try and exploit that matchup. And likewise, on the other side, Malik Nabers against Trayvon Diggs. There was a little bit of beef going on between the both of them in the offseason, so it should make this matchup a lot more entertaining on that side, because he's the guy, like I said before, for the Giants. So can Trayvon do enough on his own to take him away, or are they going to need to send help, maybe opening up opportunities for other guys? That'll be a huge determinant in this game. And like I also mentioned before, Brian Burns going up against the rookie Jalen Guyton. Guyton kind of struggled a little bit last week. There was some pressure in Dak's face, so Brian Burns, can he build off of a good performance last week against the Browns and, take advantage of a rookie trying to block him? How much help do the Cowboys bring to that side, making it easier likewise for Dexter, Kayvon Thibodeau on the other side? That's all very interesting to see how it all plays out. And then just lastly here, some of the questions I have going into this game. Will Dallas's defense finally step up and stop the run? That's the biggest story, it seems like, going on in the NFL right now. When will we see this Dallas defense sort of react to kind of getting embarrassed and getting punked a little bit? Also, Daniel Jones looked solid for the first half, mainly last week. So can Dallas, get that pass rush going, get a lead potentially, and go back to trying to send all their players against Daniel Jones, trying to get in his face and disrupt everything? Are they able to do that by, again, getting the lead in the game rather than having to chase it? And lastly here, because Malik Nabers accounts for so much of the Giants' offense, who will win that battle, basically? Who will get the early advantage in that game? Will Malik Nabers get going quicker, or will the Cowboys stop him and really take him out of the game right off of the bat? And then how do the Giants, and in the other scenario, how do the Cowboys kind of react to that? That's going to be a big part of this game. And with all of that being said, I'm going to pick the Cowboys to win. I don't think I've actually picked them to win. I think I picked them to win against the Saints, but then after that, I haven't picked them to win, obviously, this year. They beat the Browns, which surprised me. Likewise, the following week, they got destroyed by the Saints. So I don't know where to stand with the Cowboys, but still, this game, I feel like it'll tell us a lot about the Cowboys if they lose this game. We'll learn a lot more about them if they lose. Hopefully that doesn't happen, because it's going to be bad all over. It's going to really collapse in their locker room, in the entire, just organization around everything, if they fall to 1-3 and hold the last place spot in this division. It would certainly be a new low for the Cowboys. So because of that, their pride on the line, I think they're going to find something within them to win this game. So that leads me to my next segment. After this upcoming break, we're going to get into bringing the Cincinnati Bengals into this conversation now. They're playing the Carolina Panthers also this week. What would a loss do to the Bengals compared to the Dallas Cowboys? Which team would be affected more with a loss? Would it be the 0-4 Bengals then, or the 1-3 Cowboys? We're going to get into answering that question when we return after our first break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, I'll diss my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Back here now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to bring in and continue on from the last segment where we previewed tonight's game between the Cowboys and the New York Giants. And now I wanted to kind of build on that and bring in the other matchup that intrigued me this week, talking about the Bengals also playing at the Carolina Panthers in this Week 4 matchup. These two games certainly have my attention because of the ever so famous what-if scenarios of potentially seeing the Dallas Cowboys or the Cincinnati Bengals lose again, and what that would mean for them and their seasons going forward, right? Because I think these are the two most criticized teams right now so far because people expect them to obviously be better than their record show, right? One's 0-3, still needing to find a win, and the other one is 1-2 and hasn't played very well at all. Both of them haven't played particularly great football yet. And, the thing about the Bengals was that, they start the season off pretty badly. That's just who they are. They're going to get it eventually. Well, if they start 0-4, now it kind of shifts the energy around everything, right? Around the organization, around how people view this team, because it's not only just that the Bengals start bad. It's that the fact that you're pretty much about a quarter through the season and you still haven't found a win. That's basically a month now gone where you've, now have to chase wins rather than, having them saved up in your back pocket in case you need them later on when you play these divisional games in which the game could go either way, basically, right? And if you start 0-4, it basically means that almost impossible, I would think, for any team to make the playoffs starting 0-4. I'm almost certain that's never happened before. So we're right there at the cusp with the Cincinnati Bengals. And likewise for the Cowboys. At 1-2 right now, yeah, they've gotten a win, but it's really been blown out of proportion because of their run defense, basically. It hasn't been great at all, or NFL level at all for that means. They've just been too easy to kind of get hold of, be taken advantage of in these scenarios where teams just go out there and feel like they can walk all over them. And yeah, it might be a case where it happens once and you're just like, all right, let's just forget that like it never happened. But then it happens again. And now it's getting to a point where, all right, like as men, as professional athletes, you have to come to a point where you're thinking, like, this just can't happen. Anything else can happen. Any quarterback can throw for 300 yards on us, 4 touchdowns through the air, but we're not going to get beaten up and stomped on every game by the opposing team just walking in back-to-back home games where teams have just walked in there, just moved them back against their will and just imposed their will all over them. So that's where we are with the Cowboys and the Bengals, two teams that I think at the start of the year in the offseason, while there was some turbulation with the contracts, right, with Jamar, with CeeDee Lamb, with Dak Prescott and all that, T. Higgins also, if you want to throw him in there, there was all that talk, but still, people expected these two teams, probably more so the Bengals than the Cowboys, to be real contenders as the season went on. Yeah, maybe you lose a game here or there at the start, but to be 0-4, nobody would have had that on their bingo cards or anything like that. So that's really the kind of surprise, the level of shock we have if one of these two teams, or I guess both of these two teams could lose. So what would it mean for their season, right? We look at their opponents that they're going up against, and that adds a little bit more insult to injury, right? Because you look at this week coming up, the Giants and the Carolina Panthers. I'm pretty sure I deemed these two teams the worst two teams in the NFL a couple weeks ago, right? And now both of them are coming off of their first win last week. The Panthers looking like a brand new team, like they just got rid of everybody else in the first 2 weeks and brought in a couple new guys in week 3 to demolish the Las Vegas Raiders. They beat them and put up 36 points. Andy Dalton obviously came in for the benched Bryce Young, and they just look completely different, right? And regardless of what that means for the Panthers, you can't, hide the fact that they look pretty good on offense overall. They punted a couple times, right, but putting up 36 points. If they would have played the Bengals this past week, they would have beat them by 3 points. So now heading into this matchup, Andy Dalton facing his old team in the Bengals, and the Bengals still obviously looking for a win now, kind of getting into more desperation mode. It's not a scenario where I should be feeling this insecure about whether or not the Bengals have enough or can do enough, have enough on defense, I should specify, to beat the Carolina Panthers, right? It's not a thought that would have ever crossed anybody's mind in the offseason or any point this season, honestly. So that's one matchup. And then obviously we just finished talking about the Giants and the Cowboys with what the Giants went through in the offseason, getting rid of their best player. The discourse there was with Daniel Jones and getting that contract to him. The Hard Knocks episodes of John Mara being distraught over getting rid of Saquon, how they came to the decision, the conversations that were had as well. It was all very revealing, and the Giants got clowned for getting rid of Saquon, obviously, and then in the first game he scores like 3 touchdowns, and they just look like just fools, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, for making that decision. But now they've come out of that. They won a game in very impressive fashion, like I said, against the Browns, and their defense looks to be pretty solid. They're capable of making some stops, and you look at the Giants as well, and that's why I highlighted Devin Singletary, because he's been playing pretty decently. To try and fill the shoes of Saquon, that's almost as hard of a task, as impossible of a task that there is for just any running back. But he hasn't been doing that bad. And also their offensive line has been doing pretty solid, over the past couple of weeks. So it's not like these two teams are just getting blown out each week and that they're both 0-3, right? The Panthers and the Giants are coming off a very good week. So I shouldn't feel as unsure about whether the Cowboys can go beat the Giants or whether or not the Bengals can go and beat the Panthers. But that's where we are. Must-win territory now, I think, for both of these teams. I don't think that's really a question for all the reasons that I laid out. And even saying that now, it's not what you'd associate with elite contending level teams, right? We talked about the Bengals being in a great spot, mainly because Joe Burrow was coming back, and also you were able to keep T. Higgins, franchise tag him for one more year. Everything was going to be put into this basket to go and try and really compete this year. And then now, to have a must-win game in Week 4, it's unprecedented. It's completely unexpected. So that's what they're dealing with. And then same thing for the Cowboys, right? The whole thing about the Cowboys is trying to get into the playoffs and performing well in the playoffs, right? It's almost taken for granted that you have to get there, obviously. And now with the lack of additions that they brought in and how just inactive they were to try and really reinforce this team with all the glaring needs that they obviously needed, to be 1-2 right now and be in a must-win situation right now, it would be such a new low for the Cowboys at this point to find themselves in a position to barely make the playoffs or not even make the playoffs at all. And that's why I think a loss this week for the Cowboys would just mean a little bit more for them than it would for the Bengals, right? I think it would be worse for them because I feel like it would completely destroy everything that they have kind of building up, right? They have Mike McCarthy on the last year of his deal. Do you go to 1-3 and then potentially think about maybe getting rid of him at some point if you start 1-3? The locker room already seems to be not the most sturdy, to say, at this point, with people making comments here or there, talking to the media, not really being the most filtered when speaking to the media. It feels like another loss, like they've had the last 2 weeks, could really crumble that entire thing. Like I said before, they would have the worst record in the division. Something that you would have never guessed going back to last year. Also, everyone is questioning Dak and the contracts that they got to CeeDee and Dak Prescott, obviously. So what does that say about that decision, right? If you go 1-3 and made it such a big deal, obviously it was a big deal to re-sign these two guys, but to re-sign your two best players and to now be somehow worse would say a lot, and you'd have a lot of second guessing about those decisions, more so than there is now, right? For waiting so long to extend Dak to the highest paid contract for quarterbacks, CeeDee Lamb, basically the same thing for wide receivers. You'd have some now more explorative questions about, maybe you decide to trade one of them now because you need something back. You can't just stick with doing the same thing each and every week. That's the level of what we're talking about now. Because for the Bengals, if they were to lose, it's sort of the similar thing, right? You go to 0-4, there's finger pointing in that locker room. Maybe Zach Taylor's on the hot seat from that point on. The division that they're in, the AFC North, I don't think starting 0-4, you'd be in a position to win the division and then much less make the playoffs. So similarly with them, do they start exploring the ideas of trading maybe T. Higgins or Jamar Chase? I heard that be thrown out this morning on ESPN, I'm pretty sure. So for me, they have similar, consequences to losing, and I just feel like Dallas definitely has more to lose because of the fact that it would certainly be such a new low to go, what is it now, like almost 28, 30 years or something like that, around there, without, getting to a conference championship, but now you don't even make the playoffs, and you have a lot of money going to CeeDee and Dak, and your head coach is on the last year of his deal. It's hard to think that this situation would get any worse than it would be when the Cowboys would be 1-3. And then going forward, if they can't beat the Giants, I think they play the Steelers the following week, then the Lions, then the 49ers. And then at that point, how many of those games do you think they're going to win? It would look a lot worse for the Cowboys to be 0-1 in the division and then playing those next teams right after that. I think a loss would hurt them a lot more than it would for the Cincinnati Bengals for the reasons that I just said. Their schedule is also a little bit easier, so they might not make the playoffs, but it's not like it would look so gloomy for them going forward as well. So that's why I was so interested with these matchups, right? It looks like gimme matchups, right? But you just don't know. You don't know because the Bengals were plays away from being at least 2-1 or 3-0, you could argue, but that's the nature of the game, right? Pass interference calls, your defense not being good enough to stop anybody, it seems. That's what makes it so entertaining, but also why the NFL is so competitive, so unexpected. They need to win these games, must-win games for both of them. We'll see if both of them get it. Who would get it? I think they're both likely to win, I'll say that. But again, I wouldn't be too surprised if somehow they both lost. But that is something I was thinking about when looking over the games this upcoming week. And talking about the games this upcoming week, we're going to get into part 1 of my official NFL Week 4 game picks this week, a weekly segment that we do on here, going through all the matchups and determining who the winner will be. We talked about a few of them just in this segment. We're going to get into a couple more in a couple of seconds. Don't go anywhere.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Jumping right back into the action now, going from discussing some of the games in Week 4 in the last segment, we're now going to get into a couple more of my game picks this week for about half of the matchups on Sunday. We're going to finish the other half tomorrow's segment before we wrap it all up for the weekend. But to start off, we got about 6 matchups here that are pretty good ones, are pretty entertaining ones to keep track of for a couple of reasons. And one of the most entertaining ones could be this one, the Minnesota Vikings traveling to Green Bay to take on the Packers. Obviously, Minnesota's still undefeated, right? And the Packers, whether or not Jordan Love will play in this game, he says, and the reports say, that he has the chance to play, and whether or not when that determination is made could make a lot of difference, or to me, based on my pick, could make no difference, right? Because according to these reports, Jordan Love is close to coming back, which is great news, obviously, but Malik Willis played pretty well. It's not to say that Jordan Love is going to lose his job or anything like that, but, he played pretty well. He surprised everyone with how he got the ball out, running and passing. So, I think if Jordan Love is really not 100% and you don't want to risk injuring him, they're going to feel comfortable throwing Malik Willis out there. But that's where we get into the Minnesota Vikings, because I feel like ideally you would need Jordan Love because that's your complete full offense, right? But with or without him, I think the Minnesota Vikings just have been playing such great defense, and Brian Flores has really become as big of a story to the Vikings as Sam Darnold has. Maybe even more, because I don't think anybody really thought the Vikings defense would be this dominant going into the year. I like the additions that they brought in, Jonathan Grenard, drafting Dallas Turner, bringing in guys like Blake Cashman and some of these guys in the offseason. But also Stephon Gilmore, I really liked that one. But still, it felt like they were not quite there yet. At least to me, it seemed like that. But, Brian Flores has done a great job of not only getting the best out of all these players, but making him a very dominant unit, arguably one of the best defenses in the NFL. And you just look at last week, a great performance against the Houston Texans. Very eye-opening to see the Texans really struggle. Even with all of their talent, it just looked like they had no idea what was coming, what kind of coverage they were in, and what they could do to counter, right? They just looked like it was just very reactive instead of having a plan going in there with their offense. And for how good Malik Willis played last week against the I could be wrong, who'd they play? The Titans, I think it was, right? They played the Titans, I'm pretty sure. They just played the Titans, and going up against that matchup, Malik Willis played great, made some good throws, but this would be a completely different thing. I saw a report also that some players on the Minnesota Vikings, Jonathan Grenard and I think Stephon Gilmore, mentioned the impact of Brian Flores, and they've just said that, especially with some of these young rookie quarterbacks, that they just haven't seen the entire thing, and Brian Flores is very capable of throwing endless multiple looks at them. And I think that would be the same story with Malik Willis, right? Because he just played well against the Titans, but going up against another example of good coaching in the NFL and how much of a difference that can make, I think this would be a completely different thing where you might look at Malik Willis this week and think, like, what happened, right? And it wouldn't be such an indictment against him. It's just more of a credit to Brian Flores. And that's why I think, with or without Jordan Love, I don't know how healthy Jordan Love will be if he comes back. I'm going to pick the Minnesota Vikings to win this game. They're looking very well. Obviously, the offense with Sam and Justin Jefferson, they might get Jordan Addison back this week. Should be more of the same. I'm anticipating on the road, Aaron Jones visiting his former team. He's probably going to score a touchdown. I don't think it gets much more obvious than this. So I'm going to go with the Vikings to win this matchup. It's a little too shaky for me with Jordan Love's health at this point. So the next matchup I wanted to talk about that we have on here is the Steelers traveling to Indianapolis, heavy on the run game this week, right? Like last week, the Steelers and the Chargers, very defensive slug match, heavyweight fight, whatever you'd like to call it, because of how much both teams like to run the ball. Both teams have very good defenses, and this week, at least the running game aspect of that, I think still holds true. No disrespect to the Colts defense, but I just think losses like DeForest Buckner, Ebukam, one of their better pass rushers, he's out the entire year, and now you lose another one of your great linemen. I think that's too much of a hurdle to overcome, especially going up against the Steelers, who want to run the ball first and foremost, and then work off of that with Fields and George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth and all these guys. So I feel like that's too big of a loss to kind of overcome here. Pittsburgh's defense, I think, they're definitely the best defense the Colts have faced up until this point, if I'm not mistaken, right? They've played the Texans. They've also played I'm drawing a blank here. They played the Packers and also now just played the Bears. All very good, but I think the Steelers' defense up until now should give them more problems, especially if you're not getting the same response on the other end like the Chargers provided with their defense. I think it could be a long day for Anthony Richardson, as good as he is, talented, very good athlete. I think he's still just going through the natural growth of a young quarterback because he missed so much time. Yes, last year. He leads the league in interceptions. So I think this would be a more favorable match for the Steelers defense, not having prominent players on the Colts defense. I like the Steelers to win. Justin Fields is playing better each and every week, it seems. So I'm going to take the Steelers again to stay undefeated, and the Colts will go to 1-3. Then this next matchup, another interesting one. The Denver Broncos against the New York Jets. The Jets are coming off of a 10-day rest period since they last played on Thursday. Now they are hosting the Denver Broncos, which they got their first win last week. Very impressive, very surprising. I did not think they were going to beat the Buccaneers at all, but then to beat them 26-7, get Bo Nix's first win. Very, very surprised by it. I think that's just the word to use. And now this matchup is a little bit harder, obviously, for the Broncos because the Jets showed what they're capable of against the New England Patriots. They were very dominant in that game. It wasn't much of a competition, really, for the majority of the night. And I think there's extra motivation for Aaron Rodgers here because if you guys remember, when Sean Payton was still doing TV and Nathaniel Hackett was the head coach of the Broncos, Sean Payton said something like this is the worst head coaching job in the history of the NFL or something like that, really going in on Nathaniel Hackett. He eventually went back on those comments, but Aaron Rodgers didn't take so lightly to Sean Payton speaking that way about his former coordinator at the time, now obviously the offensive coordinator for the Jets. And as much as Aaron Rodgers wants to deny it and say that he's not thinking about it, he is. He definitely is. And he's going to go out there, probably throw for a couple touchdowns. And I would not be surprised if there's a little look over there, a little glance, a little stare down over at Sean Payton. That's just the nature of everything, right? So that way, the Jets coming off of an extended rest period at home again, and the Denver Broncos just got news that one of their more reliable players on defense, Alex Singleton, tore his ACL last week, so he's out for the remainder of the year. It's too much for a rookie quarterback to play against a good defense, not have the same response on his. The Jets at home again, I think they're going to win this one pretty comfortably and go to 3-1 now on the year. The Broncos will drop to 1-3. Then another very interesting matchup that we sort of already talked about in yesterday's segment, I believe. The Saints traveling to the Atlanta Falcons, an NFC South matchup. I predicted that the Falcons will win, basically just going over it. The biggest thing to me is that both teams have obviously offensive line issues. Like both teams are missing their centers. The Falcons are missing one of their starting tackles. And even still, I feel like the Falcons' defense will be the reason why they end up winning this game. I don't know how not having Eric McCoy there for the Saints will affect their running game, which if they don't have that and they really can't establish that, we saw Philadelphia really pressure Derek Carr, and I think the Falcons are willing and are definitely capable of doing that because they have those two ball hawks back there, and Justin Simmons and Jesse Bates. They can play a lot more man coverage, kind of drop one of them in and have one of them on the backside a little bit deeper and kind of police everything back there because they're both so good. It gives them the option to kind of send more people after Derek Carr. And he, let's say he just lessens a little bit, his impact lessens a little bit when he's getting pressured, like most quarterbacks you could say. But with Derek and how reliant they are on this running game. If that's not going because of Eric McCoy's absence, I feel like the Falcons have a better chance here to take this matchup. So we're going to go with the Falcons in that game. And then one of the last couple ones here, the Eagles playing at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a rematch of the wild card round last year in the playoffs. A lot of injuries to talk about here. I have no idea who's going to play in this game. I don't know if A.J. Brown's going to play. I don't know if Devontae Smith and Lane Johnson are going to get cleared for their concussions in time to make this game. So there's a lot to deal with here for Philadelphia, right? But still in that same breath, I really didn't like how Tampa Bay played last week against Denver. Their defense looked very, very permeable. Their offense was very dull. And last week we saw Philadelphia kind of stick with it. Their defense played very well. Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis stepped up. They got more pressure on Derek Carr. And I think they just locked everything down a little bit more. They showed me that they're able to hang in games when their offense isn't playing particularly well. So the fact that the Eagles still could be missing all these guys and still have Saquon and Dallas Goedert, I'm going to take my chances with the Eagles and say they're going to win this one. I don't think Tampa Bay's defense will hold very well against this offensive line for the Eagles and Saquon Barkley. They did it last year, but obviously Saquon wasn't on that team. He's going to once again be the difference, and the Eagles will win this game. Kind of get some revenge there on the Bucs. And lastly, we just talked about this game. The Bengals at the Carolina Panthers. Andy Dalton against his old team. The Bengals better win this game. They're more talented. Their defense can't be this bad, right? I know Andy Dalton just put up 36 points and they looked decent, right? But we should be talking about two different levels here with the Bengals and then like the Panthers, right? It shouldn't be this close. I don't know if it's just me. You guys will let me know what you guys think, but it's certainly a weird spot because the Bengals are good on offense, right? They got their offense clicking a little bit more, but defensively, like, man, they can't stop a lot of offenses, especially in the passing game, and the running defense isn't fantastic either. So they better win this game. I'm gonna pick them to win this game, but if they don't, I don't know what I'll say next Monday when we come on here, but we're going to take the Bengals. They're going to finally get their win and hopefully get this train going a little bit here on both sides of the ball. But those are all my game picks for the first half of it. We're going to get into the second half of the entire slate tomorrow's episode before we wrap up the week. But for right now, we're going to head into a break, and when we return, we're going to preview a very intriguing Sunday Night Football matchup between the Bills and the Baltimore Ravens. Two AFC contending teams, two MVP candidates in this matchup. We're going to get into all of it, the predictions, the matchups, all of it, when we return in just a few seconds.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC. To access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
We are back on the Chip Shot Football Podcast now to get into some more matchups this upcoming week. The biggest main event card, I guess you could say, in boxing terms, right? The Bills taking on the Baltimore Ravens Sunday Night Football this upcoming week. Week 4 has these two teams matching up. Very, very interested in this matchup because of the fact, like I said, we have two potential MVP candidates, two of the AFC's most likely contenders for the conference, and two of the most dangerous quarterbacks in the running game in Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson as well face off on Sunday Night Football. The Bills come into this matchup still undefeated at 3-0, and the Ravens finally got their first win last week against the Dallas Cowboys. Baltimore, at least this morning, were listed as the favorites, 2.5-point favorites at home, which I honestly wouldn't have thought they'd be favored. I thought the Bills have done enough to kind of be the favorites in all their matchups going forward, quite honestly, with how handedly they've won all these games. But there is reason for it, right? We're gonna get to the Bills in just a second, but for the Ravens, a few knocks to some of their more prominent players. Roquan Smith is dealing with an ankle. He's questionable. 3 of their offensive linemen are also questionable. Their center, Tyler Linderbaum, Andrew Voorhees, and Patrick McCarry are all listed as questionable. I don't think it's too severe, but something to keep an eye on. If one or a couple of them can't make it to the game, they've been questionable this week. Then also, looking more at this Bengals team, right? 3 close games so far throughout the year. You look at the reverse touchdown call in the game against the Kansas City Chiefs. They could have arguably won that game. Then you look at the 3-point loss to the Las Vegas Raiders. 3-point loss, right, gives you a little bit more optimism, but they did blow a lead, so, it's give and take there a little bit. Then a 3-point win last week against Dallas. Another game where maybe if they were playing a better offense, a better team just in general, maybe they end up losing that game. You don't know. So 3 very close games that really could have just gone any which way, which I guess gives you optimism in one hand because you know that the Ravens are just right there, a few plays away from, winning all of their games. But on the other hand, you look at the 3-point loss to the Raiders, and that's another blown lead. And also most recently to the Cowboys, giving up that massive lead that they had isn't a great sign, obviously, for them. So they could swing either way, and I think that's a bit of a worry for the Ravens going forward, but still, they looked great last week, all that being said, in the first 3 quarters, but then, of course, they gave up that lead there going towards the end. A positive sign from that game is that they finally got Derrick Henry going for the entire game, not just a couple of, or mainly the first half, and then kind of die off in the second half. You look at Derrick Henry, he had 25 carries, the most he's had in any of the games so far, 151 yards and 2 touchdowns, and they were just dominating with him the entirety, most of the game, I should say, over the Cowboys. But, that lead kind of shrunk in the fourth quarter, and luckily for them, they were able to kind of close it out there through the running game, but still, too close for comfort for me. They should have definitely handled that game a lot better. So it is just, I don't know, it's something like the Ravens can't really shake off for some reason, right? Just, there's always that worry that they're going to give up a lead. They've done it to the Raiders. They've done it in the past. So that's one thing that if they can correct and, really finish teams off, it's going to be a lot better of a sign going forward for the Ravens. But, that is something that I still worry about. But speaking about a team that really doesn't mess around, right? You look at the Bills, and they're the complete opposite, right? Because it's 3 games in a row now where they've had 31-plus points. They've only allowed 10 points in each of the last 2 games that they've played against the Dolphins and the Jacksonville Jaguars. They had that comeback win against the Arizona Cardinals, which shows you 2 sides of the spectrum, right? They're able to come back in games. You can't rule them out, but also, once they get ahead of you, they really make it a point to really bury you and keep you down, like we saw against the Jaguars and the Dolphins, right? Against the Dolphins, they score, I think, on their first or second drive, and they don't give it back up. The defense plays great. I think they might be one of the best teams, best defenses that play with a lead. We talk about the Cowboys and how they want to play with leads, but I think the Bills, once that defense knows that Josh Allen is hitting on all cylinders, they got a 7-10 point lead, they really elevate themselves to another level, and I think they're the best in the league right now at doing that, because like I said, once they have that lead, it looks like Greg Russo, Von Miller, Ed Oliver, AJ Epinesa really do their best to get to the quarterback, just all 4 of them, and then from that point on, they can drop more people into coverage, and they create turnovers. That's something that they do very well. They turn the ball over, get the ball back to their offense, and then you find yourself down 14, 20 points in just the first quarter, the first half, really. So it's what the Ravens it's kind of like their worst nightmare, I think, just again, for a lack of a better terms, right? Because they're able to come back, the Bills are, and also they're able to hold leads. And for the Ravens that have kind of become notorious to giving up those leads, it's not something you'd want to be known for going up against the Buffalo Bills. So the Bills are coming in here a lot more optimistic, riding high on all these wins, but they are doing it still without some of their best players on defense. There's going to be no Terrell Bernard or Teron Johnson again in this game. They've already been ruled out by head coach Sean McDermott, so two of their best defensive players not playing in this game is mind-boggling how, like I said, this defense just, regardless of who's in there, apparently just turn into a completely different animal when they know they have the lead, and they could just be a little bit more reckless, taking a little bit more chance, and it usually pans out for them based on the results and their records. So, with all that being said, though, I kind of gave a worry for the Ravens before. Now my only worry about the Bills would be that, the Cardinals kind of gave them trouble, but they were able to come back at home. Then you play the Jaguars, who didn't look great, haven't looked great at all, arguably one of the worst in the NFL. Then the Miami Dolphins, there's just something weird there, right? Whenever they play the Dolphins and the Bills, it just looks like the Dolphins are beat. They beat themselves before the game even starts. And now this is really one of their first legitimate chances to play against a very good defense and a very, very tough offense to stop with Derrick Henry, with Lamar. I'll be interested to see how dominant maybe the Bills are, or maybe they show a bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Just a bit of, I guess, vulnerability on their defense when like the Arizona Cardinals, right? They were able to put up some points on them. Are the Ravens going to put up some points on them? And then, how do they react to being down in some games? They've only been down one time. They were able to come back, but I want to see another team really challenge them to reassure myself that this Bills team is certainly playing like the best team in the NFL. So if they're able to kind of get tested here and win this game, it'll be a very good sign going forward. But looking at some of the key matchups to help us determine who will win this game, it starts with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson against that Buffalo run defense. Can they impose their will on the Ed Olivers, the Von Millers, and get those guys to come back down from the pass coverage, right? Can they load up the box a little bit more, not just have Von, Ed, and AJ Epinesa get home just rushing four? Are they able to bring more guys down, trying to stop Derrick Henry, trying to stop Lamar from running the ball? And once they do that, who benefits off of that? Are we going to see another big game from Isaiah Likely? We haven't really mentioned him since week one. Is Mark Andrews going to look more of the same? He also hasn't really produced to the level that he's capable of. So how do the Ravens kind of maneuver and manipulate that defense if Henry and Lamar kind of get it going a little bit earlier? Then on the other side, very similar topic here, very similar matchup. Baltimore's offensive line banged up and all, going up against the Bills' front four. Because if they're able to still get home with four, and they're able to keep Lamar in the pocket, and they really can't get anything going with Derrick, then it really becomes a problem, I think, where they become one-dimensional. And when you do that, we saw it against the Miami Dolphins, we saw it against the Jaguars. This Bills team is really in a comfortable spot when they know you have to pass, when they know they're getting home with just four. And it almost puts you in such a claustrophobic spot where you try to pass, you can't, and now they're still coming after you, forcing you to make some bad decisions, and that's where the game gets away from you. So that'll be another interesting matchup. And then also the Bills receivers going up against the Baltimore secondary, who has allowed some more big performances from receivers than I've been accustomed to. You look at week one, Rashee Rice got 103 yards on them. Second week, Brock Bowers and Devontae Adams got nearly 100 yards each on this Baltimore defense, and Jake Ferguson last week had 95 yards on them receiving. So they're not so locked down, so pressed up against opposing receivers, it seems like, this year, for whatever reason. And can the Bills receivers have success there with Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman? Dalton Kincaid could have a big game like Jake Ferguson did last year. That'll be another matchup that I'm very interested in watching. And one of the biggest factors, just here before I get into my predictions, is that which defense can contain and can really pressure the opposing quarterback, right? Because Josh, I've mentioned how this offense is so balanced that everything that they do looks like it's supposed to happen exactly like it turns out, right? Their execution is perfect, the timing. No defense has really been able to disrupt them. Are the Baltimore Ravens able to do that and maybe force Josh into some bad habits, some risky throws like he used to do a couple years ago, right? It looks like that's out of his game. Can the Ravens kind of force him back into those bad habits? And likewise, the Bills defense, can they get after Lamar, limit the amount of rushing yards he has, and force him to be more of a passer within the pocket, and how comfortable he is with doing that, absorbing that pressure as well. That'll be something super fascinating to see. And now talking about predictions, right? I feel like I'm convinced by the Bills enough that I think they're going to win this game. They're new. The Ravens' new and injured offensive line doesn't make me feel that great because they've given up some more pressure on Lamar. I think with this new offensive line, it's still relatively new. They haven't really spent so much game time together. Now they're a little bit banged up with how well Von Miller is as a player, how good he is. Gregory Rousseau is very underrated. Ed Oliver, I believe, is another underrated guy. I think they've performed well enough to make me believe in them to kind of get after Lamar and this offense and really get out in front of them rather than having Derrick Henry and Lamar impose their will on them. And the passing defense is really something also that I wasn't expecting to see as much of a weakness as I am, but I'm looking at guys like Dalton Kincaid, like I mentioned, Shakir. I think those are two of his favorite targets for Josh Allen. I feel like they could have a big day, and Buffalo have shown that they're able to finish teams off and come back if they need to. So I think the Ravens would have to play a perfect game, and I'm just not sure I've seen enough from them to believe they're able to do that against this Bills team who just runs over anybody that's in their way. So I'm going to stick with the Bills. I think they're going to win on Sunday Night Football. Close game, but still, the Bills will go to 4-0, and the Ravens will go to 1-3. And with that, we're going to move on to the last segment of today's show. We started this episode, talking about the Cowboys game tonight. We're going to finish with another segment about the Cowboys. Micah Parsons laying out a challenge to the Dallas Cowboys defense ahead of this game. What did he say, and is it helping or rather hurting this team's morale and just going forward? Is it a good thing or a bad thing that Micah is talking so much in the media about this Dallas Cowboys defense? We're going to answer that question right after this break. Thank you guys for joining me here on this last segment of today's show. We started off by talking about the Dallas Cowboys in their matchup tonight against the Giants, just set to kick off here in less than an hour Eastern time, of course. But I wanted to bring up this statement that Micah Parsons made I guess you could say again, about his teammates and the defense up until now. Not just Micah, but I mentioned this week how we see how the Dallas Cowboys players have all been showing their frustration, speaking about it to the media. But the question I posed was, when is this talk gonna, finally show up on the field, right? Because it's easier, obviously, to talk and say that, oh, we're just not playing great. DeMarcus Lawrence saying they're playing Little League football. Dak saying that they just have to focus up a little bit more and, hone in on the game plan. Micah Parsons saying that they don't need everybody to be Superman, to just stick to their job. When are we actually going to see it now on the field, right? Because it's 2 weeks now that anything, whatever they said, hasn't been the case at all. I'm interested to see when they're going to finally show us something, right? Not just talk about it, because talk can only give you and last you so long before it's just noise rather than people actually listening to what you have to say. And holding teammates accountable publicly isn't a bad thing, in my opinion, once or twice, but because this defense especially has been so bad, it's, I don't want to say forced Micah, but I think more media, I think, just also in their right, have gone over to Micah to get his thoughts on it, right? He's the one that seems very adamant and very carefree, I guess you could say, about talking about the defensive struggles and kind of calling people out, calling the defense out for attention in a lot of these statements. And he's always talking about it, it seems. We see a lot of quotes from him, and it's all in good efforts, right, to try and create a change, right? That's the intention behind what he's trying to say. He's not trying to put anybody down or anything like that. But with no change coming, apparently from weeks 2 to week 3, because Kamara ran for 115 yards, then Derrick Henry ran for another 151 on them in back-to-back games. Now you have the Giants coming in here, coming off of their first win. Most believe this is the ideal game for the Cowboys to kind of get right in this situation, but it's all about how they go about that. And I don't think anybody would really care if they win by 3 points or anything like that, if it meant that their run defense stifled the Giants so much that they were only able to put up 7 or 10 points and less than 100 rushing yards. And that's where the change is trying to get produced, right, in that run defense. And that's where Micah talks about it and where he makes some of the comments that he makes, but I'm not really a fan of how he does it, right? You could do it, but I think it's how you do it rather than just what you say that really makes the difference a lot of the times, especially as obviously one of the leaders, not just of the defense, but of the entire team. Micah Parsons said on Tuesday, he was asked about if his message will be put into action this upcoming week, tonight, on Thursday Night Football, and he said, everyone is nodding their head like they all agree, but at the same time, it's not happening out there on the field. I'm too prideful. I feel like as a competitor, you've got to be prideful and say, hey, I'm not going to allow this to happen to me. I just feel like some people are allowing themselves to keep getting smacked in the face. And it's very, very unfiltered, I guess you could say. But in one hand, you understand it, again, because you're Micah, you're frustrated out there. You are one of the leaders on this team. You have to hold people accountable, obviously, right? If you see any sort of lackluster effort, anybody out there not really showing any fight or any want, giving up too quickly, again, publicly saying something about the defense, the entire team is fine. I think, holding your teammates accountable, I think that's all right. That's fine to do as a leader. But I'm not a fan of the slight call-outs a little bit to the teammates, right? He doesn't specify any names, but I get wanting to step up as a leader, but again, it's how you say it and how, as a leader, you don't treat everybody, I guess, the same is ideally what my message is, right? Because some people, hearing these remarks, it could hit some people a better way than it hits other people, right? Some people might receive it better than others, right? Others might not like the criticism, especially if it happens a couple weeks in a row. Then maybe they don't perform well again this week, and Micah says something again and mentions some people. That could really rub people the wrong way, and the intention is good, right? But how he's going about saying it by saying some people here or there. How the other day he mentioned how some people are just trying to be Superman out there. They're not sticking to their assignments. They don't need that. Players obviously know who they are and when they're not playing well. So it could also be the defensive scheme also not changing. That's been a critique of mine as well. But it ultimately comes down to the players, like Micah Parsons alludes in some of these comments by saying some people, right? Same thing with Dexter Lawrence. He's also said that it's frustrating when the game plan is there, but some people don't follow the game plan. And it always feels like a bit of spite in some of these comments. And it's not the energy you kind of feel or that is needed for this defense to kind of get themselves out of this hole, because everybody always says when they're trying to auto-critique the defense or trying to call out their teammates or hold them accountable that it's on everybody, right? Everybody needs to play better. That's usually what people say. But when you say some people and then maybe later on you kind of add yourself into some of these comments, some of these sectioned off comments, when you're saying some people and then in other statements you're saying everyone, it could rub people the wrong way. And although it's a locker room that already feels kind of shaky, if you add on more losses to it, plus some people hearing Micah's comments, some other comments made by other teammates, right? And you add losing on top of that, some won't like these remarks, and then you have more of a problem within the locker room and you create more of a divide rather than having everybody come together to a common goal, right? I don't think that calling some people out like this and saying some people over and over again is the right way to go about it. Now, is this helping them or hurting them? If I had to make that decision, I would say that it's more helping, I guess, because it puts more pressure on these guys to kind of change their approach to the game, whether or not they are being disciplined or whether or not they are sticking to the game plan. But I don't see it as a way where you kind of have to group everyone together or maybe kind of specify some people in some of these remarks where you get the chance to highlight some of these issues. You can do that without, pointing out some people, right? Because then it becomes a point where people start wondering and asking who are those players? Who is that one guy that's not doing it? And that could slip out at some point. And then rather than everything getting better by the performances, it could just still be a very icy situation in the locker room. And I don't really think that's where this team needs to be right now, with so many people focusing in on these outside comments on what the players are saying after the game rather than how they're playing on the field is not ideally where you want to be also. And some might even receive it as a way where Micah keeps talking to them about improving, and he keeps mentioning some people. Why isn't he playing better? Obviously, right? Some people could take it like that, right? Micah's not playing lights out by any means. He hasn't really been making a contribution pass rushing, obviously, because they've been down, but also in the running game. That's almost on everybody. So that's just as much Micah Parsons as it is some people, like he mentioned. So, it's not the right attitude by continually calling people out like this. And you could, point to Micah as well by not performing well in his own right. So if he keeps calling people out, but he's not holding up his end of the bargain, then what are we really doing here? What change are we trying to make if Micah's not helping out, if the defense is still not working out as a whole? It's not what you want to be hearing from a team that's 1-2 right now, trying to get everything together and still trying to create these divided teams, like with some of these comments, right? I feel like they just need to worry about less about making some of these comments, and rather, if you have something to say to some people, you got to make it privately. And I know it seems like a hard thing to do for the Cowboys to make some of these things private, but if you really feel like, some people are just not doing their job, do it privately, go up to them, approach them, and I'm sure they might be doing that, but these outside comments as well, I don't think really help too much in the way that they're doing it. The action is fine. I just feel like they have to clean it up a little bit more when and if they talk to the media. Sometimes they could say no. They could say no to speaking to the media. That's another thing that people aren't too happy about, having to hear Micah always talk to the media. I think saying no once in a while could do him a lot better than just talking and having to respond to some of these questions. But we'll see if they could finally put these actions or these words into actions in just a few minutes here before kickoff. But now that does wrap it up for today's show. Thank you guys for joining me on today's episode of the Chip Shot Football Podcast. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. Check out both YouTube channels for more coverage around the NFL and more footage about the Chip Shot Football Podcast as well. And tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more stories, discussions, everything around the NFL with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you guys for joining me, and I'll see you guys back here tomorrow to recap the game tonight and also look ahead to the games on Sunday.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit and the coffee ain't hit.